Welcome to It's All Geek to Me, a podcast where two friends experience popular nerdy franchises for the first time. My name is Leah, and this season my co-host Kelli and I will be traveling to a galaxy far, far away as Kelli experiences Star Wars for the very first time. And I'm the expert. Let's dive in. And we're back.
Hey, that's my line.
And we're back with episode 5.
Did you forget the name again?
No. Listen.
Wow.
I don't know what it is about this name.
It's so intuitive, too. Like, yes, the Empire, they're going to strike back.
They have to strike back, I know. But I will say, when we're comparing trilogies, the three of them, this one is my favorite trilogy, but the 5th episode is my least favorite.
I'm not gonna lie, it started off a little boring for me.
Yeah, this first section is, in my opinion, feels a little out of place, only because a lot that happens in this section is sort of just like side questing a little bit, you know?
Yeah, I guess.
It's not really like the main questing.
Well, I don't know fully what the main quest is just yet, so it's hard for me to agree with you. But I did love the sexual tension.
I knew you would.
That
was definitely the best part of this section.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
That's what I'm living for right now.
Yes.
But let's go ahead and dive in to what happens.
Sure. Start us off.
Okay, so before anything actually gets shown, we start with our intro music and the opening crawl with that lovely yellow text. And it gives us a little update on what's happening. And it starts off by saying, I was very surprised to see this, that it is a dark time for the rebellion because last I checked, they were doing pretty well. But it says, even though the Death Star has been destroyed, Imperial troops have driven the rebel forces from their hidden base and pursued them across the galaxy. And it also says that Luke Skywalker led a group of freedom fighters into a new base on what I thought was a planet, later found out was a system called Hoth. And then we also are told that Darth Vader has a little bit of an obsession with finding Luke Skywalker, and that he has dispatched thousands of probes into space, into the far reaches of the galaxy, which I found to be very strange because did we have any direct interactions between Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader yet?
We didn't.
I did not think so.
No, we absolutely did not.
And it seems like, I don't know if I can't imagine that they misspoke in this official movie, but I would think that Darth is more obsessed with the rebel army / Princess Leia
over Luke.
So I don't know why they specified that he's obsessed with finding Luke Skywalker.
Well, I will always go back to my number one reason for things not making sense, which is bad writing. But if we want to delve a little deeper and, think critically about maybe what could have happened and why he could know Luke Skywalker's name, I would basically...
Because it's his kid?
What? I would guess that time has definitely passed since the destroying of the Death Star. It's not like we're picking up remotely close to that.
After.
Yeah, like time has passed. And maybe word has gotten out about, Luke Skywalker being the hero of the Death Star mission. So that could be why.
I like that better than bad writing. I think that that's a very reasonable explanation. But as you said yourself, Star Wars fans love to hate Star Wars.
Yes, we do.
So now after our opening crawl, we finally get to actually see what's going on. And we start with what looks like another giant ship, and there's evil music, so I immediately assumed this was the bad guy ship.
Those are the Star Destroyers, that particular ship.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I was getting a little confused about that because there were multiple ships and they were all being called Star Destroyers.
So the big ones that are sort of triangular are called Star Destroyers, and then the little ones that are like circular with two like panels on the side, those are TIE fighters.
I just wrote them down as probes, so you're going to probably have to correct me a few times.
Oh, no, the ones that in this section come out of the Star Destroyers, those are probes.
Oh, okay. Good.
Yeah.
So anyway, some probes come out of this Star Destroyer and they are going into space and they're presumably landing on a bunch of planets, and one of them lands on a snow-covered planet, and this evil-looking droid guy comes out of it and hovers away. away. So he's like kind of floating. He looks like an evil robot jellyfish is kind of the vibe I was getting.
That's a good description. Yeah.
And then we see a guy on a dinosaur thing, which I did later find out the name is Tauntaun?
Tauntaun. Tauntaun, yeah.
I didn't know it at this point, so that was just off of my memory. And I wrote down, is that Luke? No, definitely not. LOL. When he takes off his helmet, I guess I just don't really know fully what Luke Skywalker looks like because I was like, this is definitely not him. But I guess it was.
Well, he does look slightly different in this movie for an interesting reason. So his hair is definitely shorter, but actually, you know, we're going to get into the whole sequence here, but this whole scene was in the film to explain why Luke looks different because the actor, Mark Hamill, had actually gotten in a bad car accident.
Oh my gosh.
And his face was a little hurt from it.
Yeah.
He was scarred. And I'm pretty sure he had to go through some like facial reconstruction.
I feel like it was his jawline that threw me off because I was like, this is definitely a different, like this is a square face. And I thought I remembered Luke's face being like a little round.
Maybe he just filled out a little bit with age.
Yeah, he
I'm
might
not
have
really
aged.
sure. But he does, like those scars that show up on his face later in the sequence, I'm pretty sure are outlines of real scars that he got from this accident.
You know, that's so fascinating. I really never thought about that, but imagining what would happen if there was an actor who had something, either a surgery or an accident or something that potentially changed their features in the middle of something like a trilogy or a franchise.
In this, they just added in this Yeti fighting scene, which is what I said was the side quest of this. It's like, it feels very out of place.
Oh, that was a side quest for you? Okay. I thought that there was going to be something like coming back to it, like maybe that guy was evil / part of the Imperial Army, but I guess now that I'm thinking about it, it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, and he totally died, so.
Oh, yeah, he did. Okay.
He got his arm chopped off, but I'm sure we will definitely talk a lot about that later.
Oh, no, we've got thoughts on that, let me tell you. Anyway, so we have Luke, who I realize is Luke because he calms Han, and he says that he can't find any life forms, but it was weird because he passed right by where the droid landed, but I guess they kind of explained that a little bit after because he said that there are a lot of meteors falling, and he sees a meteor falling, and he's like, I'm gonna go check it out. I'll catch up with you later.
Yeah, my assumption with that is the droid has probably already left the area.
Yeah, and it just left the mark that presumably looks like a meteor.
Yeah.
And then almost immediately, this Yeti monster attacks Luke. He gets knocked out, and then the monster pulls him away unconscious. So then we go back to the base, and I don't think I mentioned this, but Han had said something a little on the complainy side about the planet being so snowy, and how he did not like it. Which, agreed, I hate the cold. And it looks like there's just a bunch of people working on ships, including Chewie, my pal Chewie. I was so excited to see him. And I also have to say, one thing that I have noticed and really appreciated is how many languages Han must understand. Because he can talk to so many non-English speaking creatures, including Chewie. Because at this point, Chewie is, I guess, annoyed at him for not helping. And he's just like, and Han is like, relax, I'll be right back. I'm going to help you in a minute. And then he also talks to a droid who's just like, beep, 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 beep. And he's saying something back to him. So even though he's not speaking their language, I love that he understands all of these different languages.
Yeah, and like Luke understands R2 at this point.
Yeah, I wrote that down too. Because I was thinking, how quickly is he picking up on this beep language? Because I'm still struggling with it. But anyway, so he goes to this like command room. We're talking about Han here, and him and Leia glare at each other. A very tense moment. And first of all, Princess Leia is looking good.
Amazing. This hair is great.
She did not look very good in the first movie. I hesitate to say that, but it was really the cinnamon buns in her hair.
Listen, if Carrie Fisher is listening to this podcast from wherever she is now, she would appreciate you saying that. I guarantee it.
And now I'm like, I fully get why everybody has crushes on her now because she looks so good. And it's just crazy the comparison between her now and her in the first movie with her cinnamon buns.
You really hated those buns?
I was not a fan. I was really not a fan. I think there's something very off-putting about how much they looked like cinnamon generals. And I just couldn't see anything else. But yeah, so they have this very tense moment, which honestly, if you hadn't told me in the last movie that there was potentially a brewing love triangle, I would have thought, and obviously my thoughts changed during this section, but my initial thought would have been, wow, these people hate each other.
Oh, it's the exact opposite.
Yeah, clearly.
They hate how much they love each other.
So then the general asks if Luke is back, and Han says no, he was checking out a meteorite. And the general says with all the meteorites, it's going to be hard to notice if a ship is coming, which is significant. Yes. And then Han tells him that he has to get out of here. He needs to leave. There's basically a mark on his head because he hasn't paid back Jabba the Hutt, which at this point, I don't understand why the rebel army or Princess Leia couldn't help him out of his debt there. Yeah. I don't really know why. But then him and Leia have another tense moment where he's like, all right, I'm leaving. And then she says, all right. And then he's like, all right, well, don't get all emotional. Bye. And then he walks out and then she chases after him. Yes. And then this argument ensues that blew me away, let me tell you. So then, even though she was very stoic in the exact moment before, now she's like, what the heck? I thought you were going to stay. And he starts arguing with her, but it's very emotional. And he's like, admit why you want me to stay. And she's like, you're a good leader. You're great for everybody. And he's like, no, don't lie to me. Don't lie to yourself. You have feelings for me. And she's like, oh, you're insane. And then he's like, why are you following me around then? Do you want a goodbye kiss? And she says, I'd sooner kiss a Wookiee. And he says, I can arrange that.
I can arrange that. I also like another line. She said something like, we need you. And he says, we don't need me. You need me.
Which again, if you hadn't said anything, I think this moment would have shocked me, because I feel like up until this point, aside from that one casual comment that Han said where he's like, do you think she's into me in the first movie? I did not get any vibe that they were interested in each other. Has something happened between the two of them?
This conversation to me really shows us the passage of time, shows us everything that we've missed. In my opinion, this isn't like the first time that this conversation has been brought up, which is why I think it's fueled with such like anger, because in my head, they've talked about this before. Han has maybe admitted something, she denied him, and then now he's being this way because he doesn't want to put his feelings on the line anymore.
You know, I am a person who loves love, and I love love in stories, but my absolute favorite thing is when two people love each other, but they are either fighting or they can't be together for some reason. And it speaks to my soul, and I'm living for it.
It's kind of like that toxic love that like you would never want in your real life, but you just like love seeing it on screen.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah. Not good for real life, but very, very good for romantic tension in movies and books.
Agreed. And I love that she's just like meeting his energy as well, you know. She is not a shrinking violet at all.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we saw that a lot in the first movie as well, when they were kind of going back and forth. But anyway, then we cut to our favorite droids, R2-D2 and C-3PO. They're walking down the hallway and they're chatting, which I totally missed what they were saying to each other. But it was a very short conversation because then they approach Han, who's fighting with Chewie, because Chewie apparently started taking apart the ship a little bit to fix it. The Millennium Falcon, which now I will admit, upon listening closer, I did hear them refer to it as the Falcon.
Thank you. Listeners, did you hear that? Leah was right.
I'm a little upset about it though, because why would they spell it Falcon in the subtitles?
The Millennium Falcon. I think with a British accent it sounds like.
I feel like they should spell it Folcon if they want it to be pronounced Falcon. But anyway, so Han is mad and he's like, we're trying to leave now, and now you've started taking apart all this stuff. And then C-3PO approaches and he says, Princess Leia is trying to get a hold of you on the communicator, and Han's like, I turned it off. And then C-3PO says she's trying to find Luke because nobody knows where he is. He never came back. And then Han gets really upset. He calls somebody over. I don't know exactly what the guy's title was, but he asks if Luke showed up and the guy says no, maybe he came at the south entrance, and Han is like, maybe that's not good enough. And then he says he's gonna go check it out, and then C-3PO says privately to R2-D2, between you and me, I think Luke is in considerable danger, which is worrisome. So then Han runs over to the south entrance. He doesn't see Luke in there, and then another soldier guy is like, oh, maybe he just forgot to check in with us. And Han says, no, that's definitely not what happened. And then he is going to take his, say it again, Tauntaun? Tauntaun.
What?
I don't know. I write things down as they're spelled in the subtitles, and it's spelled Tauntaun.
Get that strong Jersey accent in there for it. Got the tauntaun.
Yeah. If you couldn't tell where I'm from, let me grab my coffee and put it in a bag.
And jump on my tauntaun.
So then we have this moment where Han is suiting up and he's saying he's going to go out and find Luke. And one of the soldier guys is arguing with him and saying that his tauntaun is going to freeze to death because it's cold out there. And I guess at nighttime it's even colder. And Han is like, I don't care. We have to go save him. And he runs off. And then we cut to Luke and he is in a cavern, this Yeti monster's cavern. He is strung up by his feet and it looks like they're pretty much, his boots are frozen into the ceiling of the cavern. And he is looking worse for the wear, for sure.
Yeah.
He's not looking great. And he looks over and he sees the monster is chowing down on his tauntaun.
Making the grossest noises.
I'm trying so hard to say this without a Jersey accent.
No, you're saying it great. You're saying it so good.
Yeah, he's making his gross noises. I know Leah loves the chewing and
No.
smacking noises.
Hated it.
And then Luke sees that his lightsaber is just out of reach.
Convenient.
Yeah, very convenient that it happens to be right there in the snowbank next to him. But he tries to reach for it. He cannot. He's a little too far away. His boots are still frozen to the ceiling. And then he closes his eyes and we know that he is summoning the Force.
Yes.
So the first time we get to see the Force in this movie, and we see the lightsaber kind of wiggling, getting itself ready to come to him. I don't know how long it takes for the Force to activate. And then the Yeti monster notices and he starts ambling over, and in very convenient timing, Luke manages to grab his lightsaber using the Force, turns it on, swipes himself free by, I assume, melting the ice with his lightsaber, and then he chops off the Yeti's arm, which is a very exciting moment for me, and then he just runs off into the snow. Now, let's take a pause here.
Let's talk about this arm.
We gotta talk about the symbolism of his arm being cut off. Now, one of our listeners actually tweeted at us at All Geek Podcast and said that we should have an arm cutting off counter.
That is a great idea.
I think that's a great idea because at this point, up until this moment in the series, I believe it has happened 4 times.
I think so too.
Am I accurate here?
There was Obi-Wan Kenobi in the bar cutting off that guy's arm.
Yep.
There was Han talking about Chewie ripping off arms, so that doesn't count because that didn't actually happen.
That doesn't count, but there's still symbolism in it.
There was definitely another one, but I can't think of what it was.
I think there might have been something with one of the robots got an arm cut off too.
C-3PO lost his arm.
That's right.
That was it.
He lost his arm.
lost his arm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was like laying there and he was like,
just leave
I'm
me.
dead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll say it's 4.
I think a counter of 4. And I'm really excited to dive into the deep symbolism of the arm, but I'm going to have to watch the whole franchise in order to discover what that symbolism is.
What is the symbolism? We're going to have to come up with something.
But anyway, so back to Luke, and he is just running out into this pretty desolate snow planet. And again, I have to remark about how interesting it is that full planets in this franchise all have the same climate throughout the entire planet.
Yeah, the entire planet.
And I'll actually talk a little bit later about my thoughts on planets. We have also learned at this point that at night the Tauntauns could freeze to death, so it's not looking good for Luke. And we also actually get a quick little scene with R2-D2 using his little beacon power to try to find Luke, and C-3PO, who I'm still slightly convinced could be a bad guy, is like, you need to give up. my joints are getting cold. Let's go back inside. And I'm just thinking, why is he so eager to let Luke die? It's suspicious to me.
He's not eager. Come on.
But R2-D2 is scared that he's never going to see Luke again. And C-3PO is like, dude, I'm sure it's fine. Let's go inside and ignore him because I am secretly evil. I don't know. It just seems slightly evil.
Interesting.
Cut back to Luke again, and he is flagging. He keeps on falling. He pulls himself back up. He trips and falls again. I mean, he is freezing to death, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I also wrote that at this point, Han was running around on his Tauntaun, looking around. And I wrote, does he have to search the entire planet? Which is the other thing I was thinking about these planets. Does this rebel base exist across the entire planet? Is there some sort of radius at which Luke was moving around? Or is he just, how big are these planets,
I would assume it's just a small section of the planet, but I would also assume that the entire planet is frozen.
That's what I was thinking, because also this Yeti monster could have taken him anywhere on the planet, and he could have just died out there, but conveniently he is an important character to the plot, so that's not going to happen.
He can't die.
Speaking of important characters, we do cut to Princess Leia, and she is stressing out.
Yep,
and at this point I was wondering to myself, is she worried for Han? Or is she worried for Luke? Because Han is out there searching. And I don't know. Now I'm starting to get a little suspicious.
I think she's worried about both of them, but she might be a little more interested in what Han is doing.
Which is interesting. But they tell Princess Leia that they have to close the base for the night. They have to close the doors. And R2-D2 says in his beeping language that he can't find Luke at all. And C-3PO lovingly tells Princess Leia that Luke's odds of survival are 725 to 1. And she does not respond to him, and she just gives him a look, and he's like, oh, but sometimes R2-D2's statistics are wrong. Sometimes, occasionally, it's fine. I'm sure it's fine.
Once in a while. It's happened once,
Yeah, it happened, I think, one time before. I don't know. But C-3PO also says that he thinks that Luke is going to be all right, which, again, I'm just like, what is with this false comfort? I don't love that. I don't know. I'm a little suspicious of C-3PO.
You and C-3PO.
I don't think he's specifically a bad guy, but I don't think that he is honorable. That is my concern at this point.
I do get that from him, yeah.
Oh, and then when they close the base, Chewie cries out, and I was so sad for Chewie. And I was thinking Chewie's definitely sad about Han, right? Because they're besties, which I love their best friendship. It makes me so happy.
Yeah. Well, I think he can be sad for Luke too.
Yeah, but Han is his bestie. And he's like, oh, he's out there. I don't know Chewie's language, but I'm assuming he's crying out, oh no, my best friend is out there and he could potentially freeze to death and then I'm going to be on my own.
I think that was close to what he said.
That's probably what he said.
A good translation. You're learning Wookiee.
And then we cut back to Luke, who appears to be dead. Just for a second, I thought he froze to death on the ground, but he hears a voice and he looks up, and it's our pal Obi. Appears to him in a ghostly, forcey kind of manner, and he tells him to go to the Dagobah system to learn from Yoda, the Jedi Master who taught Obi.
Can I just say, when I was writing my notes for this section, I wrote, Luke hears a voice, he looks up, and he sees Obi. And then I looked at my notes and I was like, did I just write Obi in my notes?
Yes, you did.
And so I deleted it and I wrote Ben. Because I was like, no.
I have to tell you, we've also gotten a considerable amount of tweets from listeners who say not only do they refer to him as Obi, but there are apparently a couple of references within the franchise of people referring to him as Obi.
Well, we'll have to call those out when we hear them.
I'm really looking forward to them. I appreciate not getting any spoilers for exact timestamps or anything because we don't know when Obi's going to pop up, but I am very excited to hear him be referred to as Obi.
Yeah.
But right after we get this message, we see Han kind of breaking through this mirage because he is running up with his Tauntaun to rescue him. And he jumps off. He's trying to see if if Luke is still alive, which I thought was a really good moment where he was like, come on, you got to give me something. You got to give me something to see how he was doing. The Tauntaun actually collapses, presumably due to the cold. And then Han drags Luke over to the Tauntaun and he cuts it open. And meanwhile, Luke is calling out for Ben. So we know he's not in good shape right now. And Han stuffs Luke into the dead Tauntaun, which is gross, but it is an efficient thing. We know that is what you have to do if you're freezing to death and you got a recently deceased animal with you. You gotta go in there.
Crawl inside.
Not ideal, but it is what it is.
I hope I never find myself in that situation.
I confidently know that I will never find myself in that situation because I am not outdoorsy enough to even be remotely close to that.
Valid.
And then I was very confused at the next moment, but it kind of cleared itself up for me. It seems like it's the next morning and there are ships flying overhead and we have very tense music. And I did not know if these guys were good guys or bad guys, although I will say a little bit later in this section, I realized that the bad guys tend to wear helmets that look like Darth Vader helmets. And the good guys, I need to just start noticing if they have the rebel signal on their helmet, because I was like, are these bad guys finding Luke and Han? But no, he keeps on saying, Commander Skywalker, do you copy? Commander Solo, do you copy? Yeah. So if they're commanders to him, then he's got to be a good guy.
And typically the rebels are in orange, and with the Imperials, they're either in helmets or they're like really old guys in gray suits. Or gray space suits or whatever.
Whatever their version of a suit is. It's something very fancy, but also spacey.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, anyway, so the guy, I don't think he heard from Han or Luke, but he says that he found them. So yay, moment of celebration.
No, Han says something. He says, took you long enough or something like that.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't even hear that. Wow. This is why we use subtitles, because otherwise I will miss things. Well, I missed them anyway, so I guess it doesn't matter. But then we see a very quick shot of Luke in some water tank, which I'm guessing is how they heal people in the future in Star Wars.
Yeah, so it's called a Bacta tank, and it's basically just like healing water.
Love it.
I guess there's serum or something in it. I don't really know.
Yeah, and Luke does have a good amount of scars on his face now, even when he is healed. So I'm referring to this next section as the hospital bay, because he's like in like a nurse's quarters room thing. And he's laying there. Han and Chewie come to check up on him and they're being really cute. Chewie is yelping with excitement. So he's just like, which I love Chewie. I cannot get over the fact that I love Chewie so much. And Han is really happy to see Luke and he's like, hey, you don't look so bad. And then he turns around and Princess Leia is standing there with her stank face. She is not a fan of seeing Han in the hospital bay. And he's like, I guess you wanted to keep me around for longer. And then Leia says, I had nothing to do with it. Although she's kind of smiling when she says it. Like, I feel like her angry face tends to seem a little flirty, or at least when it comes to Han.
I agree.
But she tells him that it's just too dangerous for ships to leave right now. So I guess Han does have to stick around. He can't leave even though Jabba the Hutt is out for his head. And then her and Han start going back and forth literally right in front of Luke and Chewie.
And Luke looks so sad.
Which is awkward. Yeah, Luke is getting upset because Han is like, oh, that's a good story. And then I don't remember exactly what they said back and forth, but Chewie is mocking him a little bit. And then Han says, oh, well, you didn't hear her before when she confessed her feelings for me, which I don't know if that was her and him arguing in the beginning of the movie or if that's something we missed. But then...
No, that was that scene.
Princess Leia kind of pushes him away and she's like, you don't know everything. And then she kisses Luke on the mouth and walks away. And then Luke does the typical guy smirking, holding his head.
Hand behind the
excited thing. But I'm thinking at this point, I have a lot of thoughts. Okay. First of all, Luke seems very excited that this is happening. But if I were him in this situation, I would be furious that I am clearly just being used to get back at Han. Clearly, she is only into Han. I don't even, at this point, I'm thinking she doesn't even like Luke, which solidifies my belief that maybe her and Luke are siblings and I didn't just make that up. So we'll find out if that's true. But I do think that her and Han are going to end up together. That is an official prediction. Write it down.
Write it down in the book.
they will end up together, even though they seem a little toxic, ? Well,
Definitely.
but we'll see if maybe they can get it out of their systems and just be normal to each other at some point in the future.
We'll see.
Yeah. And then we go back to command, and it seems like there is a signal coming through. And I think at this point, both Han and Leia are in the room, and C-3PO kind of interrupts, and he's like, oh, I can understand a million languages. And this one, I would guess, is an Imperial language. So then Han is like, all right, I'll go check it out. So he grabs Chewie and he's checking it out. And it turns out it's the evil jellyfish droid that we saw. So then they kind of have a little mini battle back and forth where Han starts shooting at it and then it explodes completely. So I was thinking, man, that's a really good shot. But then he says, I barely even shot at it. I think it self-destructed. So the Imperial Army clearly knows that they are here.
Vader's on his way.
And then we cut to a Star Destroyer, giant spaceship, and we hear music, which I am now realizing is the Darth Vader music.
Dun, dun,
Yep.
dun, 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 dun. Yep.
And we see Darth Vader and we hear his classic breathing, and he's looking out from the front of the ship, and some commanders walk in and they go over to the little control center, and one of them says that there's a lead on Hoth, but then the captain says, I want proof, not leads, because apparently there are a lot of leads. But Darth overhears and he walks over and he's like, you have a lead? And one of the commanders tells him what the lead is, and Darth is absolutely convinced that that is the Rebel Alliance, and the captain tries to dissuade him a little bit, and he's like, if we checked every lead, then, you know, we'll be out here forever. And Darth is like, no, I know for a fact that this is them, okay? Then we we get this one random shot that is very clearly in front of a green screen that was poorly masked out because they all have like a little bit of a green reflection on them. And it's Han giving orders about how to evacuate because now that Darth and the Imperial Army know they're there, they do have to get out of there. And then we see a lot of shots intercutting in the next few scenes. We keep on cutting back to Han and Chewie trying to fix their ship and it not going well, which I first thought was comedic relief, but we later find out that there definitely are some issues with the ship that need to be addressed. So now looking back, I can see that they were trying to fix it, but they clearly did not do enough. But I was just thinking, oh my gosh, they're doing a lot of this comedic relief with like Han trying to fix something, it starts sparking, and then he's like, turn it off, turn it off, turn it off, and Chewie's like scrambling to turn off the ship. So I thought they were just being funny though.
And I think it is, you know, a constant theme throughout the trilogy that the Falcon is a piece of junk.
Which at this point, I'm also wondering, I mean, okay, sure, they don't want to pay off the Jabba the Hutt fee, but they can't get him a new ship or build him a new ship.
But he loves his ship. Nothing's wrong with it in his eyes.
Well, it's going to kill him. Probably.
Well, I have thoughts on that, but I'll talk about that a little later.
And then I guess we're back in like the medical bay area where Luke is suiting up and a droid is there and it tells him that it's going to be a while. And Luke is like, oh, forget about the heavy equipment. There's plenty of time to get the smaller nodules on the transporters. And then he goes to say goodbye to Chewie and Han, and him and Chewie hug, which I'm so jealous.
So
I would
cute.
love to hug Chewie. I just imagine he's like a giant teddy bear, very cute.
Yes.
And then Han is up on the ship a little bit and he asks Luke if he's okay, and then Luke is like, yeah, I'm okay, are you okay? And he says yeah, and then he tells him to be careful, and Luke is like, okay, you too, because the Empire is coming for them.
It was a cute little goodbye moment.
It was a cute little goodbye moment, and it was actually interrupted by a little droid beeping at Han and then him talking back to him, and that was the point at which I wrote, I appreciate that Han understands so many different languages, because I think it's important, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
And then I find out at this point that Hoth appears to be a whole system and not just a planet, because they do say something, I don't think it was this, it might have been the 5th or 6th, but the Imperial guy says that they found the rebel base on the 6th planet of the Hoth system. And Darth says that the rebels know that they're coming and they have to prepare to attack. So then Darth does a little face FaceTime call with the Admiral, and there's like a little assistant guy there too. And Darth says, "You failed me," and then somehow through the FaceTime call, which I know it's not technically a FaceTime call, but that's what we're going to call it. And
that's what we'll call it. Yeah, I like it.
Chokes out the Admiral via FaceTime. Just kills him. And the guy's choking and dying. And Darth turns to the other guy and he's like, "All right, you're the new Admiral now."
And that guy looked very scared.
Which if I was that guy, I would be absolutely horrified.
Yeah, same.
That's not what you want to see when you are going into a new position, is the old guy in your position being murdered right in front of you, casually. So then back to the rebel base, and Leia is giving everyone orders. And again, I just wasn't fully capturing exactly what she was saying. As far as I'm aware, the gist of it is that they're going to try to get the transports out one by one.
Yeah.
And then the fighter jets have to kind of keep shooting at the Star Destroyers to distract them.
I always kind of glaze over a little bit when they're talking tactical stuff as well. But I think essentially, they're trying to get out. And I think that there's also some sort of energy field up protecting them. And they're trying to get out and be safe.
Well, yeah, we're definitely not here for the technical stuff. We are here for the intergalactic love story.
Yes.
So I totally understand. But then the first transport, I guess, gets out and the rebels are firing at the Star Destroyer and the transport made it, so everyone's happy. But then Imperial walkers are spotted, and I was actually very excited about this because I have seen those walkers before. I don't know if this is the only time we see them, but I have seen this imagery a lot in movie posters and as references to other, like in other media, I've seen those Imperial walkers.
And actually what they're called are all-terrain armored transports, or AT-ATs for short.
AT-AT. Okay, that's fun. I thought they were called Imperial walkers.
That is what they called them, but they are called AT-ATs.
Oh, AT-ATs. Okay. Well, now I know.
They never say it. I don't think they say it. At least in this trilogy, they don't, but at some point they do, yeah.
Yeah, they keep on referring to them as the walkers in this section. But then we see all of the fighter jets kind of being populated and flying off. And Luke gets in one with a guy named Dak.
Yes.
But anyway, so then a fight ensues and my eyes did start to glaze over a little bit because it's just kind of lasers going pew, pew, pew. And I did write down that I appreciate that the bad guys are wearing Darth Vader helmets because it's very easy to tell who is a bad guy because they just all kind of look like Darth Vader guys, which is very nice for somebody who's new to the franchise. And then as the fight goes on, Dak, who's in one of the fighter jets with Luke, gets hit and I guess he dies.
Yeah.
And Luke is not very concerned for being in a plane with a guy who is dead.
Yeah, I mean, what is he supposed to do at that point? Because the thing is, like, I think the way that these ships are set up is Luke is the pilot and Dak is the pew 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 guy. So
I think they referred to him as a gunner.
A gunner. That makes you better than pew 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 guy. But
we can call him a pew 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 guy if you want.
But then, you know, he calls out to another gunner who is Wedge, who I totally forgot about. Wedge was actually in the first movie. In that last sequence when Luke was going to destroy the Death Star, it was Luke, Wedge, and Biggs was his buddy back from Tatooine. Biggs died. I guess Wedge didn't, so that guy was from that section.
Yeah. Hey, he survived.
Yeah.
Which is great. And he does actually help out Luke because then he shoots out his harpoon and he circles around one of the Imperial walkers, aka AT-ATs, and he manages to trip it, which was reminding me a lot of the scene in The Lord of the Rings where they did something somewhat similar with the elephants. Olifants, that's right.
Yeah, they did do that.
But yeah, at this point I actually started to wonder if these Imperial walkers, aka AT-ATs, were particularly efficient because I'm thinking, why do they need to be these cumbersome, large animal-shaped ships? Wouldn't it be easier if they were just hovering around?
That is true. But if you're in a situation where you can't walk, I don't know. I was trying to think of something, but I have no reason to disagree with you.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like the best thing because now they can just be tripped. And I also imagine that it's kind of lurching around where, the fighter jets are pew pew and zooming around really fast. It just seems like they're on a more efficient ship.
They are stronger, though.
Yeah, I guess that's fair.
So maybe that's it.
Yeah, maybe. Well, anyway, so the rebels just don't have time to launch the transports one at a time. So they have to kind of go in pairs here now. And R2-D2 gets put on one of the jets. C-3PO gets separated from him, and he asks R2-D2 to make sure that Luke is safe, which is ironic because he never seemed to care about his safety before. And then he also tells R2-D2 to be safe. And again, we get that little moment of him, secretly caring a lot for R2-D2, which is very cute. Besties for life. And Chewie and Han still fighting over the repairs. Just a quick little shot of that. And in the background, you actually see soldiers like running to their jets and stuff. So while they're just arguing in the foreground. And the Imperial Army is continuing. They actually have like a little hologram of Darth Vader on one of their walkers. And he says he wants to target the main generator. Mm-hmm. And then Luke's ship gets hit and everything kind of gets electrified and shuts down. And then he crashes. He is jumping out of his little fighter jet and he starts pulling on something belonging to Dak, which at this point I thought maybe Dak was still alive and he was rescuing him.
No, that's what I think he was doing, yeah.
Oh, was he?
But the AT-AT was coming, so then he had to just abandon.
Oh, that makes me sad because I was thinking, man, that was a little callous of him to just leave him. But yeah, I guess he does try. He does manage to grab a gun though, or a laser.
Yeah.
What do you call it?
A blaster.
Blaster, that's the word.
Yeah, the way I interpret that is he was trying to save Dak, and then the AT-AT was coming. He couldn't do anything, so he just grabbed the blaster and went on his own.
Okay, that makes sense. And speaking of saving people, we get another romantic tension moment.
Yes.
Which is the only part I care about so far. So Han comes back to the little control center and Leia's like, what are you doing here? You're supposed to already be gone. And he says he came back to escort her to the ship. And they're kind of arguing for a little bit back and forth, but it is truly time. They got to get out of there. So she does agree. And C-3PO is running after them and he's like, wait for me. And that just happens over and over again over the next few scenes.
Yes.
So then cutting back and forth between Luke and the Han-Leia situation, we see Luke again. He's running on foot to fight the walkers and he latches onto one of them with like a harpoon thing and he pulls himself up and he starts hitting it with his lightsaber and then he jumps back down and it kind of blows up. So he knocks one out. That's pretty good. And then Han and Leia are trying to escape, but their base is being fired at. So it's kind of starting to collapse a little bit. And the one hallway that they were trying to go through to get to the ship does collapse. So then Han says something on his comm, which I must have written down wrong because he says for the ship to take off without him, he's got to find another way out. But then they do end up getting on the ship. So what did he say there?
He said something like, we're trapped. I'm going to take her on the Falcon. So he wasn't leading her to the Falcon. He was leading her to her ship.
Oh, okay. So he did say to take off without them.
Yes.
Because she was going on another ship. Okay. I thought she was meant to go on the Falcon the whole time.
No, a princess would never be meant to be on the Falcon.
That actually, now that I'm saying it out loud, it does make a lot of sense that she should not be on that ship, especially because it kind of stinks. And then we see Darth. He's actually in the base now, and it seems like he is in the control room that was just recently evacuated by Han and Leia. And Han and Leia get out of the hallway, and they close the door on C-3PO. And I just wrote WTF because that's so rude, but he does manage to follow them. And then they get on the Falcon. The engine is stalling out. And I wrote down the Falcon is a piece of junk, but they do manage to get it working literally just in time because Darth Vader sees them go. So definitely a tense moment there, but they do make it out. And then Luke gets into another jet. It happens to be the one with R2-D2, which I don't know if that's a coincidence.
I think that's his ship, yeah, because when they were putting R2 into the ship and C-3PO was saying, take care of Luke, I think it was because Luke was intended for that ship, yeah.
Okay. And then he was just temporarily, I guess, on that fighter jet thing.
Something like that.
Okay, I guess that makes sense. And then the other soldiers are like, all right, we'll see you at the rendezvous point. So we know that Luke is meant to go to this rendezvous point that everybody is supposed to go on. But it turns out that Luke is actually not going to the rendezvous point. He is charting a new course for the Dagobah system that he heard Obi tell him to go to. And R2-D2 does not seem to be on board with it, but he is just along for the ride, I guess. And he's also not thrilled that Luke is driving manual. So he makes a little reference about that. So I just appreciated that. But we cut back to the Falcon, and C-3PO keeps on trying to make a suggestion, and Han keeps on telling him to shut up, which is stressful because I feel like every time that happens in movies, there's something very important that the character has to say, but he doesn't just scream it out. But if C-3PO did say something important, I 100% missed it.
I think it's more of like just C-3PO's personality, where he's always just like, oh, I'm the helpful droid. Let me give you all this information that you don't need. And he's just like, please.
Yeah, well, he is clearly not being very helpful.
No, he's not. He's constantly getting in the way.
There are 2 Star Destroyers following them. And again, I started to question this because I was thinking, there are still Star Destroyers following. There are still probe things following. And why wouldn't they just follow the soldiers to the rendezvous point and just keep on fighting them?
Bad writing.
Could it be a case of bad
writing? Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, so on the Falcon, there was this hilarious moment where they have to escape the Star Destroyers, and Han is like, watch this. And then the engine just stops, and Leia's like, watch what?
I love that.
Which was great. And then it seems like the ship is just not working, so Han has to run back and try to do repairs, which is not a good sign. They're definitely in a lot of trouble. And he feels something hit the ship, and he says, that can't be a laser. What is it? So he jumps out from, starting the repairs. It turns out it is asteroids. They are approaching an asteroid field. And Han gets the brilliant idea to go through the asteroid field, which Leia is very opposed to. And he says the Star Destroyers aren't going to be able to follow us there, which it's basically implied that the reason that they wouldn't follow is because that is just a suicide mission. They're 100% not going to survive. And C-3PO actually goes and says the odds of survival are 3,000 something to 1. And Han says, never tell me the odds, which sounds like I think something that you've said before.
I don't think I've ever said that, but I do love that line. The way he says it. And it actually brings me back to a point I mentioned later that I wanted to delve a little deeper into, which is the Falcon, how it's always, being counted out, and Han just believes in this ship 110%. He never doubts it, no matter what. All he has is good things to say about it. And it's
the Force himself in the ship.
Yes, that's literally what I was going to say.
Oh, really?
Within the Star Wars universe, like, you have the Jedis who are one with the Force and they can train with the Force, whatever. But in addition to that, you have people that are sensitive to the Force, and maybe they were never found by the Jedis, or they weren't trained in the Jedi arts, or they weren't destined to become Jedis, but they are still, in a way, one with the Force. So for me and my interpretation of Han's relationship with the Falcon, and Han being able to get himself into these crazy scenarios, like going through an asteroid field and surviving, his undeniable belief in the Falcon is him using the Force to make these things happen and be successful. That's always been how I interpreted that. So I'm curious how other people feel about that and Han's Force sensitivity.
It sounds like something that somebody would write an essay on some internet magazine. Be like, why Han actually has the Force, and just pointing out arguments for it.
Yes.
So you should write that article, and I'll be writing my article on the significance of getting your arm chopped off in the Star Wars universe.
I love it. Let's do it.
But I do want to say, before we get into the asteroid field, Leia says something that really caught me off guard, because she says, you don't have to do this to impress me. Which I'm like, first of all, he's not trying to impress you actively right now. He's trying to survive. And why does she think that he is trying to impress her? Obviously, something has gone down between the two of them, because they are just, the tension is beyond this world.
Yes, it really is.
And it seems like the asteroid field, although very dangerous, but Han is managing to navigate his way through it. It seems like it's working, because the little probe things that are following them are getting hit by the asteroids, and they are getting blown up.
So those are the TIE fighters.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. So everyone's freaking out, even though it is working. Han's actually doing a pretty decent job navigating, and him and Leia have another little back and forth where he, at one point earlier, she had said something like, one of these days you're going to make a mistake and I hope I'm there for it. And at this point, he kind of calls back to it, even though it was only a few minutes ago. And he says, you were hoping to be here when I made a mistake. It might be now. And he keeps on calling her sweetheart also, which living for it, 100%.
Yeah, he calls Leia sweetheart and he calls Luke kid. And I think him calling Luke kid is like almost to undermine him. Yeah, so that
absolutely.
he is the only one in Leia's favor.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. But Leia is like, well, I take it back. I hope you know what you're doing. So they're going on. And meanwhile, we cut back to Luke and he finds Dagobah and he mentions that he's actually not picking up on any technology, but there's massive life readings. So it seems like what my assumption is when he says that is that it must be some sort of more primitive planet if there's no technology but a lot of life. So they start heading into the atmosphere of that planet and R2-D2 is worried that it is not going to be safe for droids there. But Luke is like, don't worry, it's fine. Although I think that's a little, not caring of him to not be concerned about how the droid is going to be treated.
It's a valid concern, yeah.
Yeah, that's as concerned as he's going to get. But the scopes are dead, so Luke actually can't see where he's going, but he has to start the landing, and he kind of has a little bit of a crash landing into a watery bog. And he gets up, and he seems actually really annoyed, which I was wondering, is it because his jet is in the water? Why is he so mad?
Yeah, probably because he crashed, and, he's supposed to be this great pilot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's only so much you can do on a bog planet.
Yeah. And I also don't think that this is what he was expecting Dagobah to be.
Yeah, he does actually say at one point that he's starting to regret his decision. But before that, he jumps out of his ship. He tells R2-D2 to stay put. And then something happens. I don't know if it was R2-D2's doing, but he falls into the water and Luke gets freaked out. And then R2-D2's little probe thing pokes out of the water. And Luke is just like, you got to be more careful. So I don't know if that was R2-D2 protesting, not wanting to stay with the ship and wanting to come with him, or if he actually fell.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay. And then, of course, as there always is in this franchise, apparently, there's a monster in the water.
Always.
And Luke is screaming out for R2-D2, and R2 gets shot out of the water and into like the little foresty part of the bog. And Luke helps him up, and he's looking rough, but I guess nothing's broken. And then that's when Luke is starting to say he feels like it's a bad idea. And he said it was something out of a dream, or maybe he's going crazy. So he's starting to second guess what he saw with Obi, which is fair because he was on the brink of death. That could have just been a little hallucination,
Yeah, exactly. So it makes sense that he's doubting it. I agree.
So then cutting back to the bad guys, the Admiral is approaching Darth Vader and we see him from behind as his helmet is being put on. And the back of his head
is ridiculous.
Ooh,
I'm sorry.
I was fighting so hard to not say that. And then of course you say it. But the back of his head is ridiculous. It's like pretty veiny and yellow and red. So he's definitely not, I mean, he could be human, but there's something going on there.
Yeah.
And then the Admiral does approach. Darth turns around and he says that the Falcon, which I don't know what he refers to it as, did go through an asteroid field. And Darth says that asteroids don't concern him. He wants that ship. So again, I'm thinking he's not obsessed with Luke. He's obsessed with Leia. He's trying to get Leia.
He could think that Luke is on that ship.
I guess that makes sense. So the Falcon, meanwhile, is going through this asteroid field. They've shot down all of the other bad guys. So the asteroids have taken care of business. And I wrote down, I'm not 100% sure what's going on. It seems like Han is landing in an asteroid.
Yes, they kind of went into a cave in a crevice in one of the bigger asteroids.
And it's definitely not stable. C-3PO is still trying to be the helpful droid that he is clearly not. And Han gets super annoyed with him and he sends him off to get charged because he's like, I don't want to hear your BS anymore. And then the Falcon gets shaken around and Leia falls into Han and he grabs her and she is immediately like, let go of me, which I get, but also this is kind of a moment where the ship isn't stable, so it's not really his fault. But the moment goes on for a little bit too long to just be about safety. And then Han says, don't get excited. And she's like, it's going to take a lot more than you holding me to get me excited. And then I almost fainted at this part. He's like, sorry, sweetheart. I don't have time for anything else right now. Woo!
The tension.
That got me.
It's so good.
And clearly it got to Leia too, because she is worked up. So he lets go of her and he walks away and she's just like breathing heavy.
And so is Kelly.
And me too. And I'm just ready for it to keep going. But of course, this is the exact scene that we stop on. on. So I'll have to wait and find out next week what's going to happen with that delicious tension.
I do have to agree with you, though. The sexual tension in this movie, or in this section specifically, is definitely the best part. It's so good.
Absolutely the best part. I honestly, you could cut out all of the battling, but this is a good section. I will say the majority of the section was boring to me a little bit because there was a lot of information that kind of just flew over my head. But the thing that interested me the most was very obviously the tension.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed the scenes with Darth Vader so far. I think that those, aside from the romantic part of the movie, I think those are the most interesting for me, is experiencing Darth Vader's side of these battles.
Wow, you love the evil one.
Yeah, the dark side. Is that what it's called?
The dark side of the Force. Yeah, he's on the dark side.
Yeah. But yeah, so that is it for this section. We'll come back next Thursday for the second third of the movie. And by the way, we also post on Twitter. You don't have to have an account in order to see our tweets, but we do post the week of what we're watching up to. So if you do happen to be watching at the same time as us, you will always get those timestamps.
Yeah, which is super helpful for people watching along with us.
Yeah, I love that some of you guys who are listening are watching it for the first time and experiencing it the same way as me. It's so much fun this way.
Or for people that are watching it for the millionth time and enjoying along with us. Much appreciated.
That's true. Yeah, I'm sure the majority of people are watching for the millionth time. But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening to another episode. We'll be back next week, and
may the Force be with you.
May the Force be with you. That's what I was thinking of.
Bye, everyone.
All right, see you next week.
You've been listening to the It's All Geek to Me podcast, hosted by Leah and Kelly. Make sure to hit subscribe in your favorite podcast player and give us a rating. You can also follow us on Twitter at All Geek Podcast. New episodes drop every Thursday. See you next week.